Good morning, hello. Can I just take a, no one's done a stage selfie yet, so just smile and look awake.
Very good.
Brilliant, thank you. Just a bit of morning stretching activity will be good. If you are aware of Box, raise your hand now.
Ah, very good.
Splendid. If you are currently using Box in your institution as a live thing, raise your hand now.
Oh.
Okay, this is great. Well, hopefully this presentation is going to change your life just a little bit, because I think Box, I'm a big evangelist of Box, and I think that of all the IT projects that I've been involved in at Lancaster, this is probably in the top 2 of actually making a real change for our users. So hopefully, between us, we can highlight what Box does and why I think it's the most fantastic thing, and you should all implement it immediately after this. I believe the rule is that you have to have a marketing department slide to explain about your institution, so here's mine. Lancaster's in the northwest, just a little bit up from Manchester. You're very welcome to visit whenever you'd like. It's top 10 UK university. I think even if you sort of average out the league tables, we still come out top 10. Do fairly well in the NSS scores. We've got a whole load of alumni. We do all right about graduate employment. We are quite small, so we formed this exciting thing called the NA, which is all the sort of northwest universities clubbing together to bid for research income. We've had quite a bit of investment in our campus, which is regarded as sort of fairly nice. Our student halls have won best student halls for the last several years in a row. And we have 17,000 students, 2,500 staff, and 125 people in the IT department, housed in a nice black cube that's sometimes called Mordor, and also holds our data center. So we came into this with a load of general storage kind of challenges, and I just wonder if some of these might resonate with where you're at. So the first complaint, I used to hear this because I perform a kind of business partnering role and go and talk to people. People would say, Chris, you know, IT never gives us enough space. And I would say, but we've got loads of space, we've got loads of disks in the data center. You know, you've only got to come and ask. But in reality, this was a time where we were giving people, you know, maybe 500 megabytes of quota on their personal drive and maybe a terabyte if they were a member of research staff. And that wasn't really doing it. And also when they rang the help desk, there was a tremendously complicated process of gaining access to extra space. People said they could never find anything. We had research drives, personal drives, admin drives, drive mappings coming out of your ears, and people could never find anything. Sharing was a nightmare. If you wanted to share your personal storage or your departmental storage, that was really pretty tricky. And when we came into the Box project, we were even spinning up kind of VMs for people to log into in order to be able to share files, and things were getting fairly crazy. There was a general sort of concern about cloud services. I think we'd probably, I don't know if you can overdo security training, but we'd done quite a lot of work on security, and you've got to be really careful with your data. And that kind of hampered us when we then said to people, you know, you might like to think about using cloud services. They were very suspicious, so we'd done something right. We were also seeing a huge number of different devices, iPads, Kindles, Macs, ZX Spectrum, that's a slight joke, but lots of different things. People were complaining and saying that our offering was a complete nightmare to use. They couldn't use it from home. They had to map the VPN. Are any of these challenges sort of resonating with you here? And the main question was, well, I use Dropbox at home, so why can't it just work as seamlessly and easily as that at work? And they were right. We were in a bit of a mess. So what we did is we thought we'd drill into that in a bit more detail. So we actually went out and did a load of user case studies, and that's something that Box are actually really helpful with. They give you all the templates on how to do it, can help you through. So this is just some examples of the many staff that we went to talk to. So we talked to Lucy. They said, you know, we want to collaborate with our students really easily. We want to use it to do marketing campaigns and to run events. They were quite happy with all the basics that Dropbox would give you, plus some decent search capability. If we delivered that, they were going to be really happy. Then we went to talk to some researchers. These are actual people we talked to, by the way, not just, I didn't just find some stock images. The big thing for research was they wanted to securely work with other people across the globe and at other institutions, and those people, crucially, probably won't have a Lancaster University IT account. So they had to be able to share things, collaborate together and work and share folders and do all that kind of good stuff. The other thing that they really needed is compliance with the Research Council or their research funders' guidelines. So that was really important to them. Ooh, And finally, kind of admin staff in the faculties, they were really interested in being able to put meeting papers together, to be able to issue them to people, to be able to have agendas, to be able to get people to comment on papers, do reviews, assign actions to people. And again, they were really keen on being able to do search really easily and not need a local IT account. So we kind of got all these case studies and more together, and then started to think and look at the market and see if there was a product that just might do it. And if you're following the thread so far, there was.
Thank you very much, Chris. So, my name is Valerie. I look after the EMEA education business for Focke.
Valerie, you might need to go on the mic, I think.
Oh, yes, that's true. I should stand near a mic so you can actually hear what I've got to say, rather than just see me mime it with some slides. So I am the EMEA Education Manager for Focke. We currently work with around 420 institutions, and 250,000 of our users are actually in the UK, and they're from universities today. So what Focke is, a lot of you are apparently, I was very surprised but also very pleased to see a lot of hands shot up to say that you've already been familiar with Focke, or at least you've heard of us, which is a good start. Slightly disappointed that fewer hands, of course, went up when I said, are you already using it? But to give you a little bit of background for those who are less familiar with Focke, we started out in 2005. We were actually the result of a lot of the challenges that were addressed at the beginning of this presentation by Chris, which was that our two founders were at the University of Southern California, and they were asked as part of their studies to go out and explore new online business ideas. And so off they went, like good students, and started to interrogate people on what might possibly be a good online business idea. So they started talking to their local businesses, to fellow students, to parents, to lecturers, etc. So, and when they came back together as a project group, they had all of these inputs, right? So they had emails they'd collected. Someone was very creative and made a video. Some scrawls on pieces of paper and a napkin and so on. And what they realized very quickly was we're working together as a project group, but we have nowhere to put it and work on it together at the same time if we're not sitting in the same room. We can email this stuff to each other, but we don't have a space that will allow us to work together. And with that, 11 years ago, Focke was born. So today, we are a stock market listed company with around 2,500 employees today, and we fall in the sort of category, if you like, of both something called enterprise sync and share. That's sort of where we started out, but much more so today as a modern content management platform. And really the focus today, and Chris will highlight this, is to transform the way that organizations work, both from university perspective, but also from businesses. And one of those ways is to give you access to something that you can get access to your content from anywhere at any time. So as I mentioned, our sort of growth path has been fairly rapid. As you can see here now, we have 62,000 customers who have standardized on Focke. And when I say standardized, these organizations will use Focke across their business. So just to give you a bit of a sample, IBM is one of our biggest customers, and we have around 300,000 people using Focke at one time. So you can imagine the type of scale that it has gone to. Now, I've deliberately not included universities here, as we'll cover that in a little detail later, and certainly Chris will share some of the sort of impact that Focke has had at Lancaster. But as you can see, it has found application across a number of businesses, and a particular strength is around how we safeguard your data. As you can see here, there are organizations you might be familiar with in, say, the life sciences or pharmaceutical space, such as AstraZeneca, and they actually do research using Focke. Now, what we try and address today is really try and bring together those disparate systems that you put forward to your end users. Your users will be familiar having a lot of different tools that will help them do their everyday work. So whether it's your student who wants access to their timetable in an electronic format, who might want to get a text when a lesson or a lecture has been called off, who wants access to their personal files but also be able to share them with other students, through to your researcher who's trying to upload a massive amount of data onto your storage area using things like FTP. You might have document management systems such as Documentum to map out processes and workflows around content, etc. So all of these systems that might be in place in a standard organization and an institution today can bring together a complicated experience for the end user and mean that content can sit in several locations at the same time and you don't actually know which one was the right version in the first place. Oftentimes it can be difficult to maintain and certainly also obviously a little bit more costly. Now, Box, obviously, in our delusions of grandeur, think we can take center stage around your content and really bring together the different threads that you have. So Box is the secure content platform, which will then allow you to create a new content, perhaps using something like Office 365, or say for those of you who use the Google Apps Suite, to create content from those sources and then have Box as the core where you're then storing that content, where you might be integrating with other applications that you have. So you might have an HR management tool, you might have your student record system that you use, you might have several tools to publish open access data research, for instance, and all of those can be plugged into Box, as well as very practical things such as your learning management system. So thinking about how you connect where content gets created and where you work around content, that Box can act as that storage and collaboration area, and that you can navigate from there into various different systems. Now, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key things that we want to enable is not just that it connects all of these different areas of content together, but also that it then extends those to wherever you work. And I can see a lot of you who will have tablets here today, or smartphones, or indeed will, potentially be working off a laptop at this point in time. And to give you access to your content when you're not in the office, you're not having to resort to tunneling into your content using VPN and so forth, that you can do so. Now, one of the key strengths certainly that we've seen in being able to address some of the concerns that Chris highlighted at the beginning is around security. And I'm not going to talk too much about security today, but feel free to ask. There is a questions bit, I understand, from Chris, but certainly that security is a key component in how we help you maintain and manage your data. And last but not least is probably the clincher for lots of people, is it is unlimited storage. Right, and I believe I'm going to hand very smoothly, not too far from the mic, back.
No, you're not.
Oh.
Smooth fail. And also, I accidentally
Smooth
put our
fail.
university thing on your slide there. I'm very sorry.
That's perfectly acceptable. So to summarize very briefly where I wasn't finished, we are able to, through different parts of the Box functionality, be able to extend the way that you work today. So as we mentioned, being able to access your files from any location using any device and using it so very simply through a Box app. So some of you may not know that we actually have an app in place called Box Capture, which is a photo app with which you can scan documents into Box, straight into Box. We have a university doing that in order to then process certain forms that they ask people to fill in. So it'll then automatically upload into a Box folder. It'll then start a task for a member of this particular academic team, and they will then start to map out some of the actions from this form. We're also able to help you work more seamlessly with external parties. A particular example, obviously, is how a university might work with someone who is another institution, so partner institution in the case of a research grant or the Research Council, or you might be working with an organization who's helping you around your estates aspect of the business. Now, you can then start to, as I mentioned the example of scanning documents, start to digitize some of these processes that were very largely paper-based. So another example being how many of you still send out hardback or sort of printed prospectuses to your students who you're hoping to entice to your university. Well, we do have some universities who've retired their entire prospectus printing budget because they direct them all to Box, and they auto-retire that content once the prospectus is actually out of date. So they will then automatically refresh that, so they'll only ever have access to the latest. And they do some very clever stuff in the background around understanding how the person they've sent the prospectus to is actually what they're looking at, what content they're looking at. As you can see here, the Box platform really extends you much further into how you can use tools such as ours. And the Box platform is everything that you have access to, you can sort of pull apart and put together in a new way. So for instance, we do work with an organization called INSEAD. They're a very famous business school today, and all of their lecture material, all of their content delivery across all programs is done via an app they've built on Box, for instance. So with that, I'm actually going to hand back. Now I'm ready. Thank you, Chris.
Cool. I hope you're getting the idea that I'm really evangelistic about Box, because it really does solve all of those things that I said at the start. And one of the things for us as support people is you kind of get fed up of going to talk to people about what's going wrong with IT, and they have requirements, and you sort of go, yeah, we can almost meet that. Box is something that I found you've been able to say, yes, you can do it. You might need to customize something, you might need to give them a plugin, you might need to just tweak some settings, but by and large, when it's a challenge with storage, the answer has always been yes, which is good. How do we actually do it? This is sometimes the challenge. You've got all these requirements, you found a product that you think is really great, but how do you get it in? So what we did is talk to all the kind of main storage culprits first. So we went and had a look at Dropbox. This was the time when I sent an email to Dropbox and said, how much is that going to be to site license for the university? They sent a figure back, and I said, no, I think you've made a mistake. You've put an extra zero on there. And they said, no, that's right. And I think at the time, you know, they didn't really have the model for the enterprise. I think they've maybe moved on a little bit now. But we also thought about Office 365 and about Google Drive, and we kind of played with some of those tools first. We then took a paper to our IT strategy group, sort of outlining the fact that cloud storage wasn't big and scary anymore. It was something that you could do sort of fairly safely. One of the things that was really lucky for us, and I think which is a challenge, is people are worried about the different information and whether they can or can't put it in the cloud. And we actually had a project running at the same time which introduced information classifications and trained people on how to use them. And I've put lucky because it just happened to be happening before this project. But it meant that when we launched Box, we could say, you know, it's good to go for all of these types of information, and people knew what they were talking about, and they were happy to then put their storage into Box. We ran an EU tender where we put down all our requirements and all the good things we'd seen off the shopping list, and we awarded that to Box. We kicked off roughly around March 2015, integrated it with our single sign-on system, which is CoSign. Tested that in April, and in June we soft launched it. I started going around to departments and saying, you know, get going and use Box. And then we followed up with a kind of big publicity drive and a push. So if you look at the timelines there, they are not sort of scary timelines for what is a fairly kind of major IT project. I think that was one of the really good things. And actually Box have got a really great setup to be able to help you, project documentation, you know, they'll do your project plans, they'll help you with publicity material, that kind of thing. One of the things that we struggled a little bit with was launching it. So we had something that we knew was really, really good. It was the solution to people's problems, but it just wasn't getting the message out. When you looked at the stats as to how many people were moving storage into Box, it wasn't really you know, changing the world in the way that certainly I wanted it to. So we suggested having a Box launch event, and I volunteered as part of getting traction to dress up in a Box, which I did, and also the dressed up Box waddled around and visited the university departments to talk to them. Now that sounds like a fairly silly, gimmicky thing. We gave away sort of prizes and little boxes of sweets and things like that, but we actually added over 2,000 users as a direct result of having that day and wandering around as a Box. So silly as it was, it actually gave some results, and we won the Box World Tour Europe Product Launch Award, which I was very proud of. I still have the box if you want me to come to your campus and wander around in it, I'm sure.
Right. So as I mentioned, Box in Education is one of our biggest focus areas as a company. Today, I look after 420 institutions in Europe alone, of which we contribute as an education business to around 8% of our overall revenue across the company. So you can imagine, these are sort of very big, it's a very big focus area for us, and we're continuously committed to providing integrations with systems that you work with, that we pre-script for you to make it as easy as possible to integrate Box. But also, obviously, to give you a good partner network, such as University of Lancaster, to really show you how it can be done, to give you ideas of use cases, and we really spend a lot of time digging into what do people do with data in, say, the English department. So what is the best way of running a board meeting and pushing data out ahead of that meeting to all of those board members? How can we best achieve that using a system like Box? Which has led to us having a very big presence also, as you can imagine, in the US, where we actually work with all US Ivy League universities bar one. For those of you in the know, the one that we do not work with, and probably never will, officially is MIT, because that's where Dropbox was founded, so that's the only one we can't seem to get. But we do partner with organisations such as Stanford, even on things such as research in computer science projects. So certainly there's a lot of scope of what we do today. We work with a number of UK Russell Group universities today and a number of very large research organisations. So the sort of scope of what we do goes from managing some internal processes, helping sort of smooth that student experience when it comes to having access to data, but also doing that sort of business side of the university, so managing processes from an administrative perspective. We also work with a number of organizations that then take some of that content that's created in a university environment. So say if you were a researcher and you're looking to publish your content, not only on platforms where other researchers and members of the public can access it, but where it'll be formalized into printed text or book format, then we also work with those organizations, and some of them are actually named here. So Harvard University Press uses Box to help the process between review and contributor, and helping that in the pre-published stage of content. So being able to watermark content, being able to classify that content, apply metadata to it prior to it being published. We also work with the university presses here in the UK, so both Oxford and Cambridge use Box for this purpose, and my own very personal favourite statistic. For those of you who don't know, my mother's sort of family is actually Swedish, and my proudest moment is when we got to the point where all 29 Swedish universities used Box, and that's a very personal favourite statistic, closely followed by that the announcement of the Nobel Prizes is done via Box, which is probably my second favourite statistic. So we all encourage you very much to try it. I know that Chris is going to talk a little bit about some of the future of Box for Lancaster University, but certainly if you wanted to get to know more, I'm at the stand until this afternoon, so do feel free to reach out and speak to me if you were interested in knowing a little bit more what it can do for your institution. But I'll hand back to Chris.
Thank you. So just quickly, if anyone does want to come and talk to me later about all the things I do with it and all the things I've got it integrated with, very happy to chat. What's the future? I think the future is making it more available via kind of business partnering activities. So going out and talking to people about how they can use it, how they can integrate it with their systems. We've had a big impact, for example, on the facilities department, who work with loads of external contractors. We went and talked to them about how they work, sat in a meeting. It was a nightmare. I pulled my hair out. They were sending emails and missing people off. And just by saying to them, look, you could create a folder for this project and put your documents in there, and you could have one for approved and one for not approved. It revolutionized their life. So we want kind of more of that. There's a spotlight at the moment on kind of workflow and document management, so being able to take a document through a number of different people and do approvals, and that's something which you can do, but we've not really investigated yet. We'd like to do some more integrations into corporate systems, so one thing we're looking at is our student record system should store a whole bunch of information, student exam scripts, stuff that students have written, have to be scanned in. At the moment, that's all in paper filing cabinets, and when we build a new building, the facilities department tell us we can't have filing cabinets anymore, so we need to do some integration to link those through to the student records, which we will be able to do. We just need to crack on with it. And you know, archiving admissions documents and things like that. So there's a long way to go, and I think Box is now a kind of key part of our infrastructure, and we've got to keep investing in developing it to take it forward, but it's there and it's working really well. Any questions?
Chris, thank you very much, both of you. I would be interested in how you deal with the ownership of files, and this is vendor unrelated, but if you've got a secretary in the English department who then moves job and she ends up as the secretary of the physics department, what happens to the files that she created? Or if an academic leaves the institution and goes to another institution, who owns those files? How do you manage the ownership of files over time?
Okay, I'll answer that question two ways. The first way is how do we manage it, and the answer is we don't manage it. So one of the decisions that we made, which I think was perhaps a little bit too wacky, was that we'd just allow users to do their own thing. We wouldn't give them a structure, we'd just allow them to create their own folders, share them with whoever they wanted, and we'd see what happened. What happened was a lot of flexibility, but there are some problems. So when you share a file with people, they might call it projects, and you might have 50 other people that have also called their file projects, and you end up with a whole bunch of projects, and it gets a little bit messy. When you do the Box implementation, one of the things that Box can help you with is creating a sort of top-level structure that gives you a little bit of structure, but not so much that it's restrictive. And I think that's something that we perhaps should have done and may revisit in the future. In terms of ownership, you can set people as co-owners. So we recommend that before someone leaves the institution, we send them a mail and say, it might be a good idea to delegate off your Box folders and make someone else the owner as well as you, so they don't disappear. Even if they do disappear, there's an admin console, so a sysadmin or someone that's been delegated the rights can go in and actually change ownership, so that it does happen where people leave and someone rings the service desk and says, what's happened to my files, and that's recoverable as well. But there's a lot of flexibility in allowing users to set their own permissions. So previously, departments would have to come to the service desk and say, we've added a new member of staff, we need to give them access to these files and folders. Now they can just do it themselves.
Hi again, thanks very much. How have you had to deal with compliance issues where external data providers require effectively data to be held on-prem?
Yes, we have. I think the external, we've seen that for kind of research grants, some research councils, especially the NHS. I think what's happening is the external kind of grant funders and those kind of bodies are slowly moving to a position where they're more accepting of cloud services. And there is, again, kind of good help from Box in the way that they store the data, where it lives, how they move it around. So you can build a kind of case of information. And in some cases, we were able to provide documentation to funders and say, you know, this is how Box works. Are you happy with it? And they're happy. Now, sure, in some cases, that doesn't work yet. And so we do have some internal storage still, which we can use for research and which we can use for other things. But yeah, there are challenges there, but I think that the world's moving.
To expand on that, there are obviously pieces of advice that we would supply, and we're very candid in what we would advise for you to store in Box and what sort of your obligations are. That said, around compliance, we are compliant up to official sensitive status according to the government. So if you had contractual obligations to your, say, your research partners, then of course those would fall outside of that remit, certainly. But we also have the possibility of you storing data within the European Union, and we hope to offer not on premise as such, but certainly within the UK very shortly. Good. Wonderful. Thank you.
Come and chat to me later if you want more goss.